Hey everyone, if you're new here, my name's Lottie, and if you're a subscriber, welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna get into all the books that I read in January. I honestly didn't read as much as I feel like I usually do in January, but we're practicing self-love, grace, and not being too hard on ourselves in 2025. I'm proud of the 7 books that I read, and I thought it'd be fun just to sit down, recap them, and chat with y'all. If you've been here a while, you know I love to share my reading stats at the beginning of these videos, so let's dive into those. In the month of January, I read 7 books total. For the genre breakdown, we have 2 romance, 3 lit fic, 1 nonfiction, and 1 thriller, so no fantasy this month. Out of all the books I read, 4 of them were on my 25 books I want to read in 2025. My total page count for the month totaled 2,602 pages, and my average star rating for the month was a 3.92. Overall, I feel like it was like a good reading month. Not great, not amazing or spectacular, but it was like better than okay. I don't know, I feel like I was having to like force myself to read, which is never like a great feeling, but I just was so busy that I was having to like find pockets of time to get reading done. And I like being not so busy so that like reading feels a little bit more like fun and leisurely, if that makes sense. But I'm looking forward to a more leisurely February and finally kind of getting in the swing of my routine. So, okay, the first book that I read in 2025 was Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. Now, this is my very first time reading a book from Kennedy Ryan. New favorite author. Like one book, but I'm like new favorite author, guys. I am so excited to read the rest of the books in the Skyland series. I think there's one coming out in May, and then I need to read the second one in the series before that. But this book was so good. I'm pretty sure this book is on Kindle Unlimited if you want to read it and you have a subscription. But basically the Skyland series is just like an interconnected standalone series. So kind of like the Part of Your World series from Abby Jimenez, where Part of Your World, Yours Truly, Just for the Summer, they're all like in the same universe, but you don't have to read them in order. But if I'm interested in the whole series, I usually like to read them in order. So I went ahead and started with Before I Let Go. The reason it's called the Skyland series is because it's set in this like fictional suburb or neighborhood of Atlanta called Skyland. And I did not realize that these were set in Atlanta. So that just made me love the book even more. If you didn't know, I live in Atlanta. So I just feel like anytime I read a book where Atlanta is mentioned, I fangirl and like get excited. Basically, this book follows Yasmin and Josiah. They were married. They have 2 kids. They own a business together. And then everything kind of fell apart due to a tragic event that happened. And you don't really know what happened as the book starts, but you do know that like something went down. And this book just kind of follows Yasmin and Josiah. It's dual POV, which I really loved. And you kind of just see them moving through like their grief and their relationship and trying to co-parent. And ultimately it is like a second chance. I loved this book. It was so mature. I gave it 4.5 stars. Definitely one of my standout reads of the entire month. So it was a really strong start, I must say. This book just really depicts like real world problems, real grief, healing, and you really get like the full wheel of emotions. I feel like Kennedy Ryan did such an excellent job handling really sensitive topics with a lot of care. And the way that both of our main characters were just able to communicate was such a breath of fresh air, you know? Like, I was like, wow, life when the main characters actually talk to each other. I just can't say enough good things about this book. If you are a fan of romance novels, you have to read this. I can't wait to read the next one, and it's already like a standout read so far for me this year. Okay, the next book I read in January was Cultish by Amanda Montell. This was my first nonfiction of the year and was one on my 25 in 2025. So I checked a few boxes on my bookish goals with this one. Anders and I actually both listened to this one on audiobook. We got a free copy from the library, and I really enjoyed listening to the audiobook. The reason that I was interested in this book and in most of Amanda Montell's books in general is because I actually have listened to her podcast called Sounds Like a Cult. I've been listening to that podcast for like 3 years. I haven't listened this much recently, but I have been a big fan in the past. She basically does like different episodes on like the cult of SoulCycle, the cult of Disney adults, the cult of Trader Joe's. And she just kind of deep dives into like why some of these things are so popular and like where the rise in popularity came from and some of the language that's used in like their marketing or whatever it may be that is a little bit culty. So this book just kind of dives into how like radical cult leaders often use language and other tactics to like create their cults and sustain them. It really is an examination on the power of language, which I wholeheartedly enjoyed. The writing style was a little bit playful in this book, which I really appreciated for a nonfiction. I feel like sometimes we can like take it a little too seriously, and I feel like Amanda did a really good job highlighting the seriousness of what bad cults can do while also making light of some of the like lighter hearted culty references like to like CrossFit, things like that. I definitely want to read some more nonfiction from Amanda Montell. She has some other books that are really intriguing to me, so I'm going to add those to my TBR for sure at some point soon. I gave this book a 4-star just because there were a few parts that I felt like were a little bit drawn out, or I would have been interested in hearing her go into a few other topics or details. I will say reading this after deep diving and listening to so many episodes of her Sounds Like a Cult podcast, there were a lot of things also in this book that I kind of already knew from listening to the podcast or had heard Amanda talk about. So it was kind of rehashing some topics that I was just already familiar with. So for that reason, it also didn't grab me quite as much just because I was already exposed to a lot of kind of the thinking that shaped this book. But with all that being said, I think it is such an outstanding read. It's under 300 pages, so it's super quick. The audiobook's great. And if you're looking to just get more into nonfiction this year, I think this is a great place to start, especially if you like pop culture or anthropology or like language studies, things like that. So I found this really interesting and just really accessible. Okay, book 3 that I read in January was Blue Sisters by Coco Mellers. In case you missed it, in January, I posted a reading vlog where I read 3 of the top fiction books from 2024 according to Goodreads Choice. So I read Blue Sisters in that video, and then I read Intermezzo, and then I read The Wedding People. So if you want to see a deep dive into all my thoughts on these books and like live reading reviews and reactions, please go watch that vlog. I'm gonna keep my reviews for these a little bit shorter in this video just because I've already talked about them on my channel. But in case you missed it, I loved this book. So unexpected, gave it 5 stars. I've never read anything from Coco Mellers, so dare I say another new favorite author. I added Cleopatra and Frankenstein to my TBR cart this month. I went and purchased it from my local bookstore, so I want to read this soon too since I loved Blue Sisters so much. I don't know what it was, guys. I think I just had low expectations for this book going in and it just blew me out of the water. I think I was a bit cynical thinking this was just going to be like slow. I wasn't going to connect with the characters because I don't have a sister. I was worried I wasn't going to like relate to kind of the sisterhood aspect or element of this book, which was not the case at all. The writing was what really stood out to me about this book. I was going through annotating this book as I was reading it, and I don't often annotate books, so if you know that I'm annotating, I know it's going to be a standout for me. This book is super character driven. It's really an examination on grief. And if you're someone who likes kind of those character study books, I feel like this is a really compelling one. There's a lot of themes around addiction, recovery, substance abuse. So I will say that as a trigger warning because there's definitely a lot of talk about that in this, but I thought it was pretty well done. I think there were some elements that could have been, I don't know. There were some choices that were made. I don't want to say anything that would spoil anything, but I was able to just kind of look past those because I ended up just connecting with the characters so much that I just couldn't help but give this 5 stars. So then I read Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. This is probably my least favorite Sally Rooney book. I'm so sorry, you guys. I gave this one 3.5 stars. If you loved it, I think I get it. I just found a lot of the characters in this book very insufferable. Like there was no redeeming quality, and it was insufferable to the point of apathy for me. Like I couldn't bring myself to root for anyone, to care or root against. Like that's the thing. I don't want to feel nothing, and I just didn't connect with these characters, and that's okay. Also, I think the writing is just so crazy. Like your brain has to be 100% on the whole time you're reading this. This is not a book that I was like reading for escapism. Definitely a mental challenge, which I'm proud of myself for reading it, and I think it's good to challenge ourselves with books that are out of our comfort zones. So I want to acknowledge and give myself credit for that. And while I say this about the writing was also like kind of a strength and a highlight for me at the same time. Like it really was kind of both. There are some lines in this book that were absolutely incredible. Like I had to pause reading for a minute and like stop and be like, wow. And I feel like when I was doing that and I was pausing, I was like, wow, I can't believe Sally Rooney wrote that. I wasn't thinking, wow, I can't believe Margaret thought that or Margaret said that. And I think that's the difference for me between this one and Blue Sisters. I think it was also probably just a tough follow from Blue Sisters. Whatever book I read after a 5-star, I feel like it's automatically like not set up for success. And I definitely can recognize and understand why people love Sally Rooney so much. But I think if you've never read anything from her, I would definitely not start with this one. But if you have read some of Sally Rooney's other books and you're curious to see how she's kind of grown as an author, it could be worth the read. All right, then I wrapped up that reading vlog I mentioned with The Wedding People by Alison Espach. I really liked this book. I thought it was so good. It was funny. It was emotional. It really like offered a lot. I just kind of had a little bit of everything, I feel like. This book follows Phoebe, who's really just like down in life. She's depressed. She is just not having a very good time. So she decides to go to this hotel in Newport, Rhode Island that she's always wanted to visit. And she shows up there and there's this huge wedding party and the whole hotel is booked out. So she's there with all the wedding people. And Phoebe and the bride Lila kind of form a friendship. And I really enjoyed seeing Phoebe and Lila's friendship. They were very like opposites and kind of a dynamic duo in a sense that was really fun to watch. And then also the groom had a young daughter because he was previously married and widowed. And the daughter also, I really loved her kind of dynamic with Phoebe too. So lots of memorable characters, really atmospheric and like a great setting as well. I think this would honestly be a really good beach read, but I wouldn't say I'm like obsessed with it. I think I was left a little bit disappointed with this book just because I had heard so many people raving about this book, giving it 5 stars, saying it was their favorite book of the year last year. I think I just was reading this book and I kept waiting on it to like change my life. And it's not necessarily that kind of book, at least in my opinion. It kind of like straddles the lit fic genre and like the rom-com genre in my opinion. If you want something that's a bit more deep and not as like light and fluffy and makes you laugh and makes you cry, like I said, I feel like this book has a little bit of everything. I gave this one 4 stars because I think for me, I just was like expecting so much from this book given that everyone was saying like, oh, 5 stars. Actually, you know what? I think I give it 4.25 stars if we're getting really technical, but I think I just had too high of expectations going into this book, so was ultimately let down just a little bit. All in all, a great book, definitely worth the read. Okay, book number 6 that I read in January was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. I actually read this on my plane ride to Colorado to go skiing. I literally read this book in like probably 5 or 6 hours. The flight was 4 hours and I got like 70% of the way through it on the flight. I don't really want to tell you too much about what this mystery thriller is about, but it's from the same author as None of This Is True, which is one of my favorite mystery thrillers of 2024. So I thought it would be fun to kind of go back and read another popular book from this author. Okay, here's my thing about this book, guys. It was like scary, but not in like an I'm on the edge of my seat way. Like I kind of knew what was going to happen or what was going on the whole time. It was kind of a hard read. It made my stomach hurt. The way it was written was like literally so addictive. If you need a book to binge in like a day, you won't be able to put this down. The chapters are so short and like the POVs kind of change and stuff. What happened in this book just like genuinely made me sick to my stomach. I could kind of like cry thinking about it. And that's what I mean though when I say like, oh, this one scared me. Not like, oh my gosh, like, haunted house, scary. This is uncomfortable to be confronted with. And I know that scary stuff like this happens, but it's just kind of like hard to read about. So I will just say that I might leave it there. I think I gave this one 3.5, but I might lower it now after talking about it out loud to like 3.25. I read it all in one day and I feel like I have to give props where props are due for the fact that this was like so bingeable, but I don't know, it left me very unsettled. Okay, and then the final book that I read in the month of January is Wild Love by Elsie Silver. I just needed something light and fluffy. Like genuinely my headspace was not in a good space after finishing Then She Was Gone. So I was like, okay, what can I read that's on Kindle Unlimited right now that will just like make me happy and make me forget of all the horrors I just read about? So that's where Wild Love came in. And honestly, this was doing a spectacular job getting my mind kind of like back in the right place for the first 20% of it. I read a little bit like on the ski trip and then read like probably another 20% on the flight home, but I was also doing a lot of like video editing. So then I feel like I wasn't reading for a day or two and then I got back to this and I didn't really need it anymore, if that makes sense, to like be the palette cleanser. Like I felt like my palette was cleansed, but I still had like 60% of the book to get through and I was like, oh wait, like what have I done? Because I was not expecting to pick this up this month. It wasn't on my TBR or anything. I feel like I'm a huge mood reader, so that's why I picked it up, but then my mood had shifted like halfway through. So I think I'm gonna give this one like a 3.5 stars. It was cutesy, it was Elsie Silver, it was a cowboy romance. I feel like I feel very similarly about all of her books. I really, really love Reckless. Nothing else has lived up to that book for me. This one kind of compared to like Flawless or Powerless for me from Chestnut Springs. It was just like good, but it wasn't anything spectacular. I usually love childhood friends to lovers, which this is like a brother's best friend trope. I actually really enjoyed the daughter in this book. This new series from Elsie Silver, the Rose Hill interconnected series is all single father. They're not really like cowboy romances. Ford is not like a cowboy. He's the world's hottest billionaire, but they all live like out on like a ranch. It's kind of just like small town romance, I guess is more what I mean. I'm still saying cowboy from like Chestnut Springs, which also they're not really like cowboy. Anyway, whatever. Basically, this one follows Ford Grant, the world's hottest billionaire. He's a single father, and his daughter Cora was definitely a highlight of this book for me. I loved the relationship that Cora and Rosie developed, who's the female main character. Honestly, the more I look back on this one, I did really like it. I feel like I just wasn't in the mood while I was reading it, but when I reflect on it, I'm like, actually, I think I liked it. Yeah, I feel like I still stand with like 3.5, but you definitely have to be in the mood for these books. I feel like it understood the assignment. It did what it needed to do. Okay, and those are all of the books that I read in the month of January. Let me know in the comments what your favorite book that you read in the month of January was. And if you made it this far in the video, comment down below with the black heart emoji so I can know who made it to the end. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today and talking all things books. If you missed my February TBR video, I just got that up a couple days ago and it's super fun. We pick out 8 books for my monthly TBR this month, so definitely give that a watch if you haven't seen it yet. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you're new here so you don't miss a video from me. So many of you guys are not subscribed. It actually breaks my heart. So click subscribe below so you don't miss a video from me. That's gonna be it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you soon for another one. Bye!